For my fellow Catholics, this episode is for you. Have you ever had a passion that someone might have told you was selfish, maybe even sinful, but you knew this is something that could help somebody? Today's film is Nacho Libre, which is loosely based on a true story about a priest whose name is Sergio Gutiérrez Benítez, who was running an orphanage, or founded an orphanage, but it lacked funding. So in order to provide more for the orphanage, he became a luchador to make extra money. There are a lot of different videos on YouTube about how this story is based on, loosely based on this man's life. So if you want to check any of those out, then, after you're done here, you can go and check those out. But I just thought I'd throw that in as a little bit of the foundation. Now, if you know of another true story based on someone who is of Catholic faith or Christian faith, and you want to use any of the tools that I'm using in this episode to break down the story structure of Nacho Libre, there is a link in the description to these different tools, and there are many different formats, different variations, so you could choose whichever one is going to work best for you. There's also more context about the tools in my book, Absolute Cinema Storytelling Techniques. If you want to pick that up and help support what I do, I'd really appreciate it. It's one of the coolest things I've ever designed. The genre of this film is a faith-based sports family underdog comedy. The themes are faith and duty. Obviously, a lot of Catholic practices in the film, some including baptism, fighting demons. He literally fights a pair of demons. There is a mixed martial arts crucifix move in this film, which is really cool. There's temptation. Nacho struggles with his desire and with his success. It kind of blinds him momentarily of his original goal. But there's also sacrifice, where Nacho risks his position in the monastery in order to help the orphans due to his forbidden activity. So now that we have the plot figured out and the theme, we have to create a conflict with these things. For Nacho, it is obviously within his own desire to become a luchador against the monastery's rules of vanity and unjust violence. Now, normally I do a breakdown of the 3-act structure and the story circle structure, but because the vast majority of the story is told through the perspective of Nacho, we will stick with the story circle structure. However, I will share with you guys what the 3-act structure looks like. So if you want to pause here and take a screenshot and study this for yourselves, by all means. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that the climax is in a slightly different position. Now, the climax can take place in Act 2, but it's also possible to take place in Act 3. So that's why I put this here, this little arrow kind of showing that even though it's here, it's moved here. So the climax and the resolution kind of happen immediately one after the other. Anyways, before we get to the story circle structure, I just want to give you a brief breakdown in case you're unfamiliar with it, so it's easier for you to follow along once I start getting to Nacho's story circle structure. This is the Keysi story circle structure, also known as the Estrada story circle structure. There are 8 steps in this process. 1. A character is introduced. 2. The desire. There is a want and or need. 3. Complication. Something and or someone is obstructing the desire. 4. React. The character engages with the complication. 5. Progress. The desire is either within reach, somewhat obtainable, or still worth pursuing. 6. Problem. The obstruction intensifies. 7. Action. A more extreme act must be made. 8. Change. The character and or those around him have been altered. So in summary, a character has a desire. However, there is a complication which causes him to react. The character makes progress until the complication becomes a bigger problem that forces him to take extreme action, influenced by the change that he has made through the journey. Alright, so now you have an idea of the 8 steps in the story circle structure, so let's break it down for Nacho. We are introduced to Nacho. He is an overlooked cook in the monastery. He also has an orphan background within the monastery. He was raised there, and now he is helping raise the next generation of orphans. However, he feels as though he's been berated all his life. He doesn't feel respected within the monastery, and something feels missing to him. No one takes him seriously. We are also introduced to another character here, which is Esqueleto. He's a local thief, specifically stealing the Lord's chips. So we move on here to the second slice, which is desire. The desire here is that he secretly dreams of becoming a luchador, but also to have a bigger impact on the monastery. He wants a better duty.
Maybe I am not meant for these duties. Cooking duty. Dead guy duty. Maybe it's time for me to get a better duty.
It also comes with status and respect in his eyes. This is one way he would gain it. It would also provide an opportunity to have more money to provide for the orphans. And we are also introduced to Sister Encarnación, who Nacho then falls in love with. He wants her affection. So this is another desire on top of his original dreams. So what's the complication here? Slice 3. How do we thicken this plot a little bit? Obviously, the monastery forbids it because to them it is vanity and unjust violence, which is a sin. So Nacho must react, and he recruits Esqueleto to join him in competing in secret in these luchador matches. This secret nightlife that they are pursuing brings them progress, and the progress is that they get paid. They get a little taste of the glory. It also gains attention for him in this wrestling community and money, so now he can provide for the children. And Encarnación, it is giving them financial opportunity to go from slop to supper. However, just like real life, when you start feeling like you're getting somewhere, problems start popping up. The setbacks begin. For Nacho, it's the success. It kind of gets to his head a little bit. And also because he's constantly trying to get further into this industry, and Ramses constantly disrespects him. And he starts to feel like Ramses is a real douche. There's also the part with the eagle eggs. The eagle egg situation is funny because Nacho's having these setbacks and he wants more success. He's grateful for what's come so far, but he still wants more. So he pursues this opportunity to gain more powers from these eagle eggs, and it turns into a complete failure. This also continues his crisis with faith. Is it a sin? He continues to wrestle with his desire because he is also, like I said, it's getting to his head a little bit. Not only that, but then his secret gets exposed in the monastery, which puts him in a position where he is exiled. So when you're set back, you've got to take a more extreme action to get back in a better position. Here, right before he's exiled, Encarnación tells him that fighting is not a sin if you do it for a noble reason. It has to be for more than yourself. And Esqueleto joins the cause when he helps Nacho re-secure his lost spot to compete against Ramses. Because when they do their qualifying fight, Nacho loses his position. He loses to another wrestler named Silencio. However, Esqueleto reopens this opportunity for Nacho to take his place and fight against Ramses. So after talking to Nacho and inspiring him to return, he commits to his mission for the orphans. He also writes a love letter to Encarnación, this forbidden love they have. And he also writes a song which he performs a cappella for Esqueleto. So it's one of the juicier songs in the story. Anyways, so change. How does everything change in this story due to the actions that have been made up to this point? Nacho is now he's going to fight Ramses. He becomes the eagle. His eagle powers have been blessed. And he's reconciled with his faith thanks to the help of Esqueleto and with Encarnación reminding him that a noble fight is not a sin. Also, when he's getting right into the thick of the fight, his spirit is lifted when he sees Encarnación and the kids come to support him in his biggest fight. I would say this moment, when he looks out into the crowd and sees them, it kind of brings the Holy Spirit into the fight. He just gets this burst of energy and he is motivated to fight again. And he finishes Ramses with the crucifix pan and does his victory twirl very much in the same manner as Mighty Mouse. So he goes from an overlooked cook to the hero of the monastery. And in the end, Nacho, Encarnación, Esqueleto, the kids, they all become this happily ever after family. Anyway, so if I had to simplify the story to help keep me on track if I'm writing a story like Nacho Libre, this is how I would lay it out. Another thing too, let me get rid of these, is initially introducing the character. So you know that the first slice here is character. Now let's go to this document real quick and I'll show you guys another tool on how to keep track of your character and what motivates the character to behave the way that he does. So all characters go through some type of change in the story. Here for Nacho, it is a positive change arc. Let's actually put his name up here. Ignacio. So Nacho is a positive change arc character. And here we have listed out all these different elements that influence the way he behaves. So first we begin with the belief. Nacho's belief is that being a luchador brings status and respect. However, there is a narrative lie that he has to overcome. And that is that he is just an overlooked cook. Also, another lie that he believes is that fighting is for the vain and prideful. Now his want in the story, the things that really drives what he does, is fame and glory as a luchador. He also wants Encarnación's forbidden love and the ability to provide for the orphans. Now what he needs in order to succeed is to pursue his dreams for the right reasons. It has to be a noble cause, not a prideful one. And the truth that he comes to discover is that you can fight literally and figuratively for noble causes, which makes it valid. It doesn't make it a sin. It removes the sin. Anyway, so this is an extension here of that first slice of the pie. So if we go back here, for example, let's say, let me add a new layer here. Let's say you have an idea of who this character is going to be. So you have this part figured out. You know who your character is. And let's say also you know the desire. You know what the character wants. However, let's say you're struggling to figure out what's the complication, how is they going to react to the complication, what's the progress going to be, what will be the problem, the bigger problem in the story, and let's say you even don't know how like the character's going to change. Let's say you only know the extreme action here. So you have an idea that the character here is an overlooked or underappreciated character where they currently are, but they have an idea of what they want in life, and you also have an idea of the extreme action they're going to take in order to accomplish that. So in your mind, if you have an idea of, okay, I don't have the complete story figured out, but I know these parts of the story, then fill out those parts of the story in the graph so that you can at least start there. And then the rest of these points right here, you can fill out as you go along and do more research and get more ideas. But this way, at least you can pinpoint down where the story is going to go that you're sure about. And you can always change things later. Let's say you figure out something for step 3 here, and you're like, actually, what if this is the initial complication and that changes what's going to happen in the 7th step with the more extreme action. So like I said, these tools are extremely flexible, and this is what kind of helps you prevent the writer's block, is that the block happens here first. You kind of get a general idea of the direction of the story, and then you move on to actually write the script or the novel or the manga or the comic or whatever it is you're going to write. You write that after you've completed all of these 8 steps. This way, as you're writing your story, you don't get lost anywhere later. Now, as much as I like Nacho's story circle structure, I do also want to give a little bit of attention to Esqueleto. Esqueleto is a supporting character, but he also has his own narrative journey, which I thought you guys could also take an example from. It is a lot more simpler because he is a less, he's not unimportant, but he's not as important as Nacho. You know, obviously Nacho's the main character. But if we're going to break down Esqueleto's story, we began by introducing him. Who is Esqueleto? Esqueleto is a local thief. He has a pattern of stealing the Lord's chips, right? But what is the desire here? What does Esqueleto really want? Well, Esqueleto, he just really wants to survive. And in order to do that, he's thinking easy money. How can I become as successful as easy as possible? That's also kind of why he's a thief. However, there's a complication. So how do things get complicated for Esqueleto? Well, he gets caught stealing by Nacho. But Nacho, being from the monastery, wants to offer him an opportunity. He wants to help him. And he wants to help him by including him in his midnight activities in secret luchador wrestling. So how does Esqueleto react to all this? Well, Esqueleto joins Nacho in this secret midnight crusade. However, there is a little bit of clash of faith here because Esqueleto believes in science, right? But it's kind of funny because there's actually a lot of Catholic science. Science is a really common practice amongst Catholics. So I know it's played up for the movie because it's kind of like a stereotype of how people think that Catholics, or at least Christians, I think Christians are anti-science, but science is actually a big part of Catholic practice. Anyways, so after reacting to all of this, there's obviously progress. So what is the progress that happens for Esqueleto? Well, the fights bring in money whether they win or lose. So now all of his life, he's been a thief, but his status rises from thief to luchador. He's making an honest living now. However, just like in real life, when you start making big steps, things happen that set you back a little bit. So the setbacks and cynicism for Esqueleto is his continued clash of faith with Nacho, and also he's very annoyed with Nacho and the orphans. He's like, I hate the orphans.
What did you just say?
I hate orphans.
Say it again to my face.
I hate them.
Come again?
I hate all the orphans in the whole world.
But that doesn't last forever, you know. Eventually, Esqueleto gets put in a situation, specifically with Silencio, when he sees him mistreating a young kid on the streets, a kid who kind of behaves like Esqueleto. He's trying to steal a piece of bread from Silencio, and he sees Silencio mistreat the kid. Now, while stealing is bad, Esqueleto sees this kid, and it reminds him of himself when he was poor and he was stealing just to survive. So this inspires Esqueleto to take an extreme action here in step 7. Now, the extreme action is to create an opportunity for Nacho, because as we saw earlier, Nacho, he fails at securing his spot to wrestle against Ramses. So the extreme action that Esqueleto takes is he injures Silencio, which helps secure the position for Nacho to compete against Ramses and help the orphans. And so here, the major change that happens to Esqueleto is that he goes from a selfish thief to a selfless friend. He finds faith and fights for something bigger than himself, which is the orphans.
The children need a real hero. But I thought you hated all the orphans in the whole world. Not anymore. I like them.
Anyway, so if you got a supporting character, it is nice to see them have a little bit of change through the narrative. Okay, so Esqueleto also goes through a positive change arc within the story. Now I want to touch very briefly on the romance in this film. The romance is kind of a chastity love story. It's sweet and innocent because as a monk and as a nun, both Nacho and Encarnación have taken vows of celibacy. So while there is an obvious affection between the two of them, it is a very innocent love. It is also a motivating factor for Nacho to take action and grow in a way that is not sinful. Encarnación kind of becomes his guardian angel. She provides moral guidance and support. Her actions help push the plot forward by inspiring him to pursue his goal in a faithful manner. Now, what is pretty funny about their little love story is that anytime there's a little, I guess I would say spicy moment, it's not really spicy, but as spicy as it could get for two people who are celibate, is the howling wolf. So for example, when they're having their first little date and Encarnación touches Nacho's thigh and his eyebrows raise, he's like, whoa. There's like a wolf howling. And the same thing happens, but in the other direction, when Nacho takes her to the town and he's wearing his fancy clothes and he clenches his butt cheeks. And you can see Encarnación, she's startled. She has a little bit of a blush, and there's also a wolf howling. I think it was just such a funny little sound design to add to their little, how would I say, to each other, making each other blush. But anyway, so like I said, it's a very sweet and innocent love story. And I think they also do it in a respectful way. The cultural impact of this film too, I think, is pretty universal. I mean, if you're Mexican, more specifically, the luchador lifestyle is going to be a little bit more relatable. But in general, if you're a Catholic or just a Christian in general, a lot of the themes about faith and duty, temptation, sacrifice, I think everyone can relate to doing something for a faithful reason, for a just cause. There's also specific scenes in this film that are very memorable. I mean, a lot of the scenes are very memorable, but I like how there's scenes that pay homage to other things, like the Spider-Man and Nacho Libre when they're designing their own costumes. So that was a nice little nod to Spider-Man. There's also this old, I think it's a Greek practice or a medieval practice, I forget, but when you put the coins over the eyes, there's a scene where Nacho goes for a new duty and he's just visiting someone who's sick, but he thinks he's dead. And so he places the coins on his eyes for the, I forget the exact way to describe it, but basically it's like a fare you have to pay when being transported to the next world. So it was just kind of funny that he uses these coins. I don't know what inspired that, but it was like a funny thing to include. And also one of my favorite references, which there's a little bit of lore here, so I'll kind of try to explain it very briefly. But when Nacho does the Mighty Mouse victory twirl, and it's funny because Nacho Libre came out in 2006 and Mighty Mouse started fighting in 2006, not professionally, because I don't think he went professional until like 2009 or 2010, around that area. So at the time that the film came out was the same time that Mighty Mouse started his fighting career, not his professional fighting career, but he at least started fighting. And the fact that Nacho does his victory twirl is, I think, just a nice little gift from the universe, a little Easter egg into Nacho Libre for a fighter that would eventually become one of the greatest fighters of all time. And I guess the last thing I want to talk about as far as the cultural impact of the film is a lot of the lines in this film that can just be used in everyday life. I don't know about you guys, but in my family, we quote Nacho Libre a lot around the house or just when we're, in social settings. So I don't know if you guys do this, but I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple. So there's the Lord's chips, right? It's a line we kind of just use if, like, let's say there's someone bought some chicharrones or something here at the house, and if I pick them up not knowing who they are, but I started eating them, and if my cousin comes in and is like, where's my chicharrones? And then they see me and they're like, did you not know these are the Lord's chicharrones? Like just in a way of saying that's not yours, like, what are you doing? There's also take it easy. That's a funny one. Just anytime something seems to be getting out of hand, someone in the house is going to say, hey, take it easy. There's also too, if let's say you overcome something that was difficult and you're just proud of yourself, you just say, I got a little taste of the glory. So it's just, there's so many lines in the film that could be used amongst your friends and family. And I wish I could go through all of them, but it's just it feels like almost everything Jack Black kind of says is super quotable. But if, like, get that corn out of my face, I love elotes. But if someone hands me one, like my cousin, if he buys me one, he's like, I got you an elote. I'm like, get that corn out of my face. Just as a joke, obviously I'm going to take the elote. It's just a little gag between us. So I don't know. If you guys use any of these lines from this movie, let me know in the comments down below, because I'd like to hear how you guys use them. I think it's just become a staple of, the household of our family. It has become natural after watching the film however many hundreds of times we watched the film. So to wrap up this episode, if you were in Nacho's position, how would you handle the conflict between your faith and your dreams? And again, if you want to use any of these tools that I used to break down the story structure, they are available for free in the description. Just click on the link that'll take you to a Google Drive, and you can download the various formats that they are available in. Also too, if you want more context about these tools, you can buy my book, Absolute Cinema, Storytelling Techniques. It'll give you more context about storytelling in general. Anyways, that's it for this episode. I appreciate you guys' time, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.